right, now let's take a look at Module 1, Introduction to Ethical Hacking. Now in this module, we're going to get kind of an overview of what ethical hacking is, understand the concepts, the different phases in the hacking cycle, and introduce some critical terminology. All right, no security discussion can start without discussing the three basic tenets or components of information system security. Those are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, sometimes you'll hear this referred to as the CIA triad or even the AIC triad because there's a tendency to confuse CIA with Central Intelligence Agency. Confidentiality is protecting against unauthorized disclosure, keeping secret. Integrity is to protect against improper modification of data at rest, in transit, or in use. And availability is making sure that resources are available when and where they're needed by authorized users. Authenticity and non-repudiation are also important concepts, and they kind of align with the integrity concept, but there's definitely a difference between the two. Now later on, we're going to discuss the concept of hashing algorithms and digital signatures. Digital signatures give us authenticity and non-repudiation. Hashing algorithms give us integrity. Now again, we're going to pick that discussion up a little bit later in the course. But the definition of non-repudiation is that someone cannot argue that they didn't do something. I didn't send you that email. Well, that's funny. It's digitally signed by you. I think you did. So you repudiate. Non-repudiation is you can't argue you didn't do it. Authenticity, the quality of being genuine. So when I get an email from someone who I know and trust, it may or may not be authentic. If it's digitally signed, I know it came from them and it's not an impersonation attack. Now, there are other contexts to use those terms in, but those are two of the kind of primary discussions around authenticity and non-repudiation. All right, motives, goals, and objectives of information security attacks. Now, as we go through the course, we're going to see that there's a vulnerability, there's an exploit, and then there's a motivating factor. So attacks are typically comprised of a motive or goal, whatever the attacker's purpose is or what they stand to gain from the attack, a method, which is a defined way to breach the security that's typically exposed through a vulnerability. So we will discuss that in detail in later modules. We're going to spend the first part of the course talking about information gathering. Part of that is identifying vulnerabilities, and then we have exploit selection that go with those vulnerabilities. And again, the purpose that drives the attacker, motivates the attacker, may be as simple as curiosity, disgruntled workers, exacting revenge, politically motivated, etc. All right, classifications of attacks. Now we're going to hear the terms passive and active used in a variety of contexts throughout the course. Passive generally means not doing anything noticeable or remaining passive, sitting by, waiting for information to come floating by, not directly engaging the target. Active is typically noticeable. It's active activity, you're actively engaging. By doing so, you typically run more risk of being detected, but you stand more to gain. So we'll see those terms used in a variety of contexts throughout the course. But initially, passive and active will be two flavors of reconnaissance that we're going to use in our footprinting and reconnaissance discussion. Now, I'm not a big fan of just reading off slide content to my students. My job as an instructor is to summarize and simplify and give you the what does this mean to me type of dialogue. There's always plenty of time to read through the courseware in its entirety, but close-in attacks, insider attacks, distribution attacks, these are all different ways attacks can occur, which I'm not going to belabor the point and read every bullet point off every slide. Close in means I'm in close proximity. Insiders we'll discuss later in our social engineering module primarily. Once you're inside the security perimeter, a lot of your defenses have already been circumvented. A lot of threat from insider attacks. Distribution attacks, attacking the supply chain, that sort of thing. All right, information warfare. If you think about these basic concepts, if it's computer controlled, I could potentially hack it. Then you start thinking, okay, what on planet Earth these days is computer controlled? And pretty quickly you come to the conclusion everything is computer controlled. And if I can get to it, if I can actually talk to it, and I can get it to accept input from me, I could potentially hack it. But I've got to be able to talk to it. It's got to be able to receive input from me. And then it is possible that I might actually subvert the system by sending some sort of malcrafted input. And believe me, we're going to talk about that in depth throughout the course. But information warfare is protecting your assets while at the same time attacking your adversary's assets. So you look at any military campaign these days, it starts off with reconnaissance and cyber attacks, right? Taking out communications, footprinting, exploiting and sabotaging defense systems and that sort of thing. In a nutshell, if it's computer controlled, I can hack it, and pretty much everything these days is computer controlled. All right, the methodology. Probably the most important thing to get out of this initial module is the method. Okay, the method or methodology is a series of steps that, if performed in the proper sequence, should give repeatable, consistent results. There's lots of different ways this hacking methodology can be applied, but the basic 5 phases of the ceh hacking cycle are footprinting and reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and covering tracks. Now, we're going to add a little bit more subdivision in the scanning discussion and include things like enumeration and vulnerability analysis, but they're still part of that active information reconnaissance gathering phase. In the system hacking module, we'll break down the 3 final stages: gaining access, we're going to split that into cracking passwords, and vulnerability exploitation, escalating privileges potentially, maintaining access, ensuring I continue to revisit the system at will, and then clearing tracks, covering any evidence of compromise. All right, there are also defined, documented, developed methodology models. A couple notables are the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain methodology. Now, when you take the exam, you're going to get a few questions on what happens at each stage of this kill chain. It starts off with reconnaissance, gathering information, weaponization, creating a malicious payload, delivering it. Exploitation is typically the execution of the delivered payload, installation, command and control, and actions on objectives. So definitely take some time to read through the documentation in your courseware to read up on the cyber kill chain methodology, but it's a sequence of events that attackers typically follow. And once you've got something modeled like this, you can then document and counter it. So first order of business, document what they do. Second order of business, document how to actually countermeasure it at each stage of the process. Tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, refer to the patterns of activities and methods associated with specific threat actors or groups of threat actors. Now, at any given time on planet Earth, there are coordinated groups hacking, working towards a common goal. Sometimes we'll refer to those as advanced persistent threat groups. Sometimes they're nation state actors, sometimes they're terrorists. But the tactics are the way an attacker performs the attack. Techniques are the technical methods used by the attacker, and procedures are the organizational approaches that threat actors follow to launch an attack. Now, we'll be talking about these concepts as we move through the hacking cycle, so we'll revisit those terms a little bit later. All right, the MITRE ATT&CK framework is another well-known model. It involves recon, weaponize, deliver, exploit, control, execute, and maintain. So the 7 stages of the cyber kill chain are actually mirrored in the MITRE ATT&CK framework as well. And then the diamond model is our third model we're going to discuss in the course of intrusion analysis. Offers a framework for identifying the clusters of events that are correlated on any of the systems in an organization. So this is aimed at recognizing different types of events, how they correlate, different indicators of intrusion. It breaks it down into adversary, victim, capability, and infrastructure. All right, then a fairly standard, simple question, what is hacking? When you think about it, can I really define it? Hacking is not necessarily nefarious, malicious activity. That's one of the first places our heads go when you hear the term hacker. It's an evil person that causes damage. But I've been to lots of conferences and conventions over the years in my cybersecurity analyst instructor capacity. And I can't say I've met many bad hackers, right? Everybody's typically fairly good-natured. They're enthusiasts. They don't have malicious intent typically. Now, the ones we're trying to detect and prevent obviously have malicious intent and are out for payback, retribution, revenge, financial gain. But most hackers I know are good people with a huge enthusiasm for understanding how computer systems work, finding holes, and then bending the rules. So hacking is really just learning in a very detailed way how something works, and then modifying it to a degree where it produces an unexpected result. Now, the definition here is it's exploiting system vulnerabilities and compromising security controls to gain unauthorized or inappropriate access to a system's resources. Now, the intent or motivation behind it, we're going to define here in a later slide. We've got black hats, we've got white hats, we've got gray hats, but hackers are not bad people. All right, who is a hacker? Again, an intelligent individual with excellent computer skills who can create and explore computer software and hardware. For some, it's a hobby, which is how I started out. I've been a hacker since 1983 when I got my first Atari 800 computer and did my first war dialing sequence. I also found out that summer you didn't necessarily have to dial 1 for it to be a long-distance toll call, and the phone bill that month, that summer, was inordinately high. Mom and Dad did not appreciate that so much. So I've been a hacker since 1983. I've never had the malicious intent. It's always been a hobby and later on a profession, as I mentioned in my introduction. So how many computer networks they can compromise? Now, sometimes our curiosity or self-validation might get the better of us, and we might make decisions that go against our better judgment in the quest to own a certain number of systems. So whether there's malicious intent or not, you do not want to attack a machine you do not have written permission to test. Otherwise, you are potentially breaking the law. Some hackers' intentions can be to gain knowledge or to probe and do illegal things. And again, some hack with malicious intent, which are the ones we're trying to defend against as security analysts. Hacker classes. All right, so there are a bunch of different classifications of hackers. Now, we're not going to beat this to death and go through every definition, but the black hat is the bad guy. Hackers that don't have permission, malicious or destructive activities, also known as crackers, and they also will typically not share the results of their findings for the purpose of remediating the vulnerabilities. The white hats, on the other hand, our whole purpose in life is to find vulnerabilities before the bad guys do and communicate to the developer, the vendor, how to fix it. So we hack with permission for defensive purposes, and we notify under our ethical obligations the owner of the system so that they can make the appropriate modifications or create a patch. All right, gray hats. Yeah, maybe a little bit of both here and there. So let's say that you're a white hat by day and a hacktivist by night, or for whatever reason, sometimes you break that ethical code, you're going to be a gray hat. Suicide hackers don't care if they get caught, so think of those like cyber kamikazes. Script kiddies is generally a derogative term implying you don't really know what you're doing. You've just downloaded scripts and tools and software that were developed by real hackers. Now, that is not the definition by itself. I know lots of pen testers who don't write their own tools. They use other developed tools by other hackers, but they're definitely not script kiddies. So this implies a novice level of expertise and really not a whole lot of regard for the potential damage you can do by running these tools. Cyber terrorists, pretty self-explanatory. State-sponsored hackers, pretty self-explanatory. And a hacktivist is an individual promoting a political agenda by hacking, especially by using hacking to deface or disable a website. So political messages, website defacement, that sort of thing, hacktivist. All right, there are also hacker teams, industrial spies, insider we'll talk more about in our social engineering module, criminal syndicates, organized hackers. There's different levels of sophistication and organization. Now, the uber elites, you don't really even know they exist. They are ghosts in the wires, no pun intended, great Kevin Mitnick book. You also have government, military teams working towards a common goal. And as we mentioned in a previous slide in this module, information warfare is a big deal these days. If we're not engaging in information warfare, we are going to lose in the long run because, again, everything is computer controlled. All right, so what is ethical hacking? Kind of already gave it away. Ethical hacking is hacking for ethical purposes. Yeah. Using the same tools, tricks, and techniques to identify vulnerabilities and ensure system security for the purpose of fixing the vulnerabilities before they're exploited by the real hacker bad guys, right? Focuses on simulating the techniques used by hackers, verifying the existence of exploitable vulnerabilities. We're going to do the same thing that hackers do, but our purpose is to fix the holes, not to compromise the systems. Hacking is the base or foundation for penetration testing. Let me go ahead and just talk about that right now. All penetration testers are ethical hackers, but not all hackers or ethical hackers are penetration testers. Penetration testing, which we cover in the CPET course, is a very formal methodology, documentation, generation of report, and suggestion of remediation. Ethical hacking is the 5-step cycle, and that's our emphasis for this course. We're going to show you the foundation that everything is based on, but if you want to formalize and do security assessments, you're going to want to look at the pen testing concept, and we address that with our CPET course. All right, so there you have it, ethical hacking, hacking for defensive purposes and having permission from the owner of the target. So that's going to wrap up our lead-in module. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, I've selected the slides that I believe are the most pertinent, most important to cover in the course. The additional value-add information, things like legal regulations, AI, incident response, and so forth. There's more to read up in the courseware that we're going to be covering in class. I've tried to keep the class as focused towards offensive security as possible because we've got a ton of information to talk about in this course, and I don't want to detract from that primary purpose. So my job, as I mentioned in the introduction, is to take you through your first pass, show you everything from a holistic perspective, show you the important concepts, important terms, the important tools, and most importantly, the methodology. After you've completed that first pass through, we'll recommend, again, you prepare for and pass your exam, and then you come on back for another crawl through the courseware, do all the labs, the core and the self-studies, and read the courseware in its entirety. All right, so that's going to wrap us up for Module 1, Introduction to Ethical Hacking.